All right, everyone. But first of all, I just wanted to apologize for the delay. The platform that we are using had a little bit of a problem and we kind of crashed for a time. But I'm glad we're back on. Thank you for your patience and being ready and being here today. So, good morning, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the Gazelle Foundation State of Play Virtual Summit. Thank you for taking the time out to participate in this significant discussion pertaining to the role of sports in youth development, as well as play, equity, and accessibility to all. Before we begin, I would like to recognize our title sponsors, Dr. Martha Molina Bernadette and Faustina Bernadette, on behalf of the Gasol Foundation and the children and families that we serve. We cannot thank you enough for your generosity and support. We're truly grateful to have such amazing partners in our corner. My brother Mark and I started our nonprofit, the Gazelle Foundation, in 2013. Since then, our mission remains the same: to eradicate childhood obesity and empower children and families through the promotion of healthy habits. Childhood obesity is one of the most serious health challenges facing children today. Through research, data-driven programming, and advocacy, the Gazelle Foundation strives to make healthy lifestyles more accessible to all children. And through our zero childhood obesity vision, we aspire for a world where all children grow up healthy and are able to reach their full potential. Mark and I are motivated more than ever to lead a coordinated effort in the fight against childhood obesity. For those who may not be as familiar, I hope this video helps provide a bit of more perspective about our work. Mark and I are strong advocates for a healthy lifestyle for all children. Because every child has the right to play, to be able to perform physical activity, to access healthy food, and to grow in a healthy environment that allows them to reach their full potential. The most serious health problem facing children today is obesity. For the first time in history, there are more people with obesity than people who are hungry, according to the UN. One of the keys for children to be healthier is the consistency that we give them. Give them all the tools so that they can practice healthy habits every day. That they live in an environment where it is not too difficult to be healthy, both in terms of physical activity and nutrition. At Gazelle Foundation, we provide tools to empower families in underserved communities and encourage them to promote healthy lifestyles at home. We want to inspire and impact the lives of more boys and girls. If you can change the life of just one child, you are already doing something exceptional. Let's make our communities, our homes, and our world a better place. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video and gave you a little more information about our mission. One of the key components of all Gasol Foundation programs is sports and physical activity. The purpose of State of Play is to advance the conversation regarding the importance of sports and physical activity in youth health and development, and explore solutions to sport equity and accessibility. I sincerely hope that over the next 2 hours, you not only enjoy today's discussion, but also gain more insight on youth sports and ways we can all work together to contribute towards impactful interventions, strategies, and solutions to ensure all children can benefit through play. To help accomplish this, I have assembled an incredible group of experts, athletes, and professionals to lead this discussion. We also want our audience to be a part of the conversation, so please feel free to submit questions through the chat, and we will reserve time for our panelists to answer your questions as well. Now, allow me to introduce our first State of Play panel. I'll start with the most decorated U.S. track athlete of all time, Allison Felix. He's a 5-time Olympian, a 9-time Olympic medalist, and a 6-time Olympic gold medalist, and named to Time's Most Influential People list in 2020. Allison serves as a member of the Right to Play board, raising awareness for underserved children in developing regions. Allison has accomplished so much, but her greatest accomplishment is her daughter, Cameron, who reminds her every day that she can never stop fighting for what is right in this world. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I had the pleasure to meet you. I remember that in that gala that we were both honored. I think it was 2010 or 11 in LA, and I'm glad to have you on board and congratulate you directly for how much you have accomplished, and I'm sure you'll continue to accomplish. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next, I would like to introduce CEO of Glorious Sport for Good, Adam Fraser. Adam is responsible for a global portfolio of grants and capacity building investments, all focused on using the power of sport to end violence, discrimination, and disadvantage. His expertise in navigating the complex matrix of the needs of partners, stakeholders, and funders with those of community leaders and frontline delivery agents has allowed him to generate tens of millions in funds to invest into community-led organizations to drive maximum tangible impact on the ground. Welcome, Adam.
Thanks for having me, Pau. And ashamed to have to follow Allison with her achievements, but really happy to be this group.
All our achievements are different and exceptional in a way, so don't worry. It's hard to measure up to Allison for sure. And finally, we have Global Marketing Director of Wilson Sporting Goods, Amanda Lamb. Amanda runs marketing for the basketball, American football, volleyball, soccer categories at Wilson Sporting Goods. In her 6+ years at Wilson, she's played an instrumental role in reimagining the way the Wilson brand connects with the community and young athletes through fresh grassroots and direct-to-consumer initiatives. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
All right, well, I'm excited to start the conversation, and I'm sure our audience is too. So again, thank you so much for joining us, for joining today, the State of Play, and being part of this conversation. Our first question is for Allison. Allison, tell us about how sports have been an integral part in shaping you into the person that you are today.
Yeah, sports has just transformed my life. I never saw this for my life, this path. Never had the ambition to be an athlete or let alone an Olympian. But I went out for the track team when I was at a new school to meet new people and find some friends. And I fell in love with it. And so it has just provided me with so many lessons that have carried on to other aspects of my life. Learning about work ethic and how to deal with defeat and just so many lessons that I continue to go back to today. And so it has, let me travel the world, let me meet so many incredible people and learn so much about life through sport. And it's just connected me. And so I'm forever grateful, that I went out for the track team that day and that I fell in love with sport.
Oh, we all are glad that you did as well, Allison. And there's no question. I always say that sports is such a big university because it teaches so much. We learn so many lessons, so many values that we can apply in anything and everything else in our life and in future chapters. So absolutely, I couldn't agree more with you. Besides, obviously, the many opportunities to engage with people, get to know exciting people, and travel the world. And represent our countries. So it's pretty cool. We've been very, very blessed. So thank you, Allison. Adam, your organization, Glorious Sport, strongly believes sports have the power to change the world. In what ways specifically do you believe sports can impact and empower young people across the globe?
Thank you for asking, Pau. The key thing for us is really that sport is just the tool. It's just the first step. In the same way as the Gasol Foundation uses sport as that first step to tackling childhood obesity and the other issues you tackle, we support programs around the world that use sport as that step to tackle issues in education, in employability, inclusion, overcoming discrimination. And we make grants and we support organizations that are working across a whole range of social focus areas aligned to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And that's really because we believe, and going back to our founding patron, Nelson Mandela's words, that sport has the power to change the world. we believe it can change lives, it can change communities. And the sport itself, as I say, is the first step. Allison spoke about going out to try out for the team, to make friends, and the lessons it's taught in terms of work ethic, in terms of accepting defeat. All of those things and everything else that sport can do are the key things that matter to us. We're very lucky to be backed by so many of the greatest athletes of all time in our work, and Allison has championed it, and Pau, you were recognized this weekend in Spain along with the Mark and the Gasol Foundation. So there are some great examples of even the most elite athletes who believe that it's about more than sport. It's about how sport really can change the world.
I couldn't agree more, and thank you, Adam, for that recognition that we received this past week in Spain, in the south of Spain, in Sevilla. It was very, very important to our team, and we definitely appreciate it. I couldn't agree more that sport has the power to change the world and influence the world in a super incredible, positive way. And as you said, Nelson Mandela is one of my idols, heroes, reference, and I think what he did in '94 with the rugby world championship, bringing the country of South Africa with many issues and problems and segregation that it had at the time. It's just a huge example of it. So thank you, Adam, for all the work you do, and your team as well. Amanda, Wilson Sports recently invested $500,000 into YMCA youth sport programs to make sports more accessible to underserved communities. Tell us about this partnership and what inspired Wilson to make this commitment.
Sure. I'd say about a year and a half ago, like many brands, we sort of woke up and decided that, yes, we too believe sports can change the world, but we needed to I guess, build a platform to ensure that those voices were heard. And so the YMCA felt like a natural fit for us. We're in the business of sport, but we also wanted to make sure as we built that pipeline of future athletes that we were really laying down roots in communities and offering the access to play. And so I think what we're all talking about is almost this democratization and access, and how do we get kids to have those moments like Allison did, where she got to try out for the team and fall in love and change her life, right? So I think the YMCA is just a wonderful organization that not only gave us scale across the country to kind of step out and really start to drive change, but also allows us, even in the case of kind of activating in our own backyard, we can build relationships that literally transform the way these kids see the world and see how sport can change their own lives.
Oh, that's amazing. That's great work, and that's what we do. We want to provide opportunity to every kid in the world and every community to have access to explore. Whether it's sports, whether it's arts, education, an opportunity to thrive, an opportunity to fulfill themselves. So thank you for the great work, and yeah, that's why we're here. We're doing the work. Allison, I'll get back to you. What has been the evolution of girls and women in sports throughout your career? Where have you seen progress, and where is there still a need for improvement? And I'll follow up with another question after you answer.
Okay. Yes, I feel like a lot has changed. I became a professional at 17 years old, and so I've been in the sport for a very long time, and I have seen things shift. I think that there's much more of a sisterhood for women now. I remember when I came into the sport, and it was just very competitive, and I think there was this feeling that there could only be one, and it was instead of helping each other, I felt like we were scrambling for attention, for pay, and really there was this fight for it. And I think where I see things now is we're much more about lifting each other up, and that it's a win, when we all are able to be at the top together, and that there's more space. And I think it's just a really special time for women in sports, not only this sense of a sisterhood, but I think we are using our voice and we're speaking up and we're bringing attention to issues that that should be at the forefront, whether that is equal pay or mental health. I was so proud of Simone and Naomi at the Olympics and just really shining a light on this issue and being transparent with what was going on in their lives. And so I think that we're moving in the right direction. Obviously, there is much work to do in a lot of different fronts, but it does feel like we have really good energy right now, and we're really connecting with one another, and I think we're really talking to one another and realizing that we're not alone in this fight, and that there's so much power in the collective, and that when we do come together and we raise awareness or speak on different things, that we're supported and we're getting our message out.
Absolutely. No, I love the direction that we're taking, and I couldn't agree more as far as because we always been, sports is about also competitiveness, right? And performance and reaching the top. But sometimes we forget a lot of the things that we can do and we can accomplish and that are now being more done and emphasized, the power of bringing together, bringing each other towards the same umbrella and fighting for important causes and having impact. So absolutely, I love, because it's not just about performance; it's about utilizing our platforms and really making good and making impact. And we have power, especially when we come together. That's kind of what I think the realization that we're all kind of experiencing, and it's great. I think I love the direction that we're in now, and again, today is just a living proof of that. And a lot of work to do, but we're making strides towards the right direction. So, and then the follow-up question is, what advice do you have for your female athletes who are continuing to develop in the sport and are considering a professional career?
Yeah, I would say to absolutely go after it. There are no limits, to get involved and find what you're passionate about and pursue it wholeheartedly. I think we're seeing the amazing work that you all are doing on this call, and the different organizations who are really investing in our youth and investing in the future of sports. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think that we can also continue to get involved in and being hands-on and helping, in those efforts for that next generation. So I'm really excited for what's to come. I think that things are going in the right way and moving in the right direction. And it's a lot of great momentum, and I hope that we continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Do not set any limits to your potential. I love that. I think just go for it and fight and dedicate yourself to what you love and what you believe in, and do it with other people that feel the same way. So again, couldn't agree more, and I love that mindset in the message. All right, Adam, I'm coming back to you. Programs supported by Laureate Sport for Good have participation levels including nearly half female athletes. How is Sport for Good engaging girls in those places that have increased participation?
I think it's a range of things. And firstly, I should say the statistic you cite there is from last year. Because our model is grant making, our numbers shift slightly each year, but there are also years that we get that number above 50%, and we really celebrate those. The 50% itself is obviously a huge shift versus participation levels in traditional sport when we look at the gender imbalance. And the reason for that really varies country to country, place to place. Laureus is supporting programs in 50 countries and territories around the world. And the reason that girls can be excluded from sport might be very different in each of those, but it really is a common denominator across the world. Sometimes in places you would really expect to see barriers, sometimes in places where they really surprise you. In terms of tackling them, step one is role models. Allison herself obviously is a great example of that, but also role models in the community, female coaches of color, female coaches who have a disability, who can relate to particular groups who are excluded, and older kids going through the program and doing that. There's an amazing quote I love from a girl from one of our programs in India who said, she wanted people to look at her and say, well, if she can do it, why can't I? And I think that that's so crucial for the role model piece. Beyond that, there are areas like curriculum design, making sure that it's actually the curriculum is designed to be inclusive of girls, not in a patronizing way or creating some kind of easier version of things, or saying, oh, let's run a dance program to engage girls, but just making sure whatever the sport is, it is intentionally inclusive. And finally, I would say that in parts of the world, a huge amount of it is also community outreach. There's a lot of work that our programs do to kind of change the perception in communities, in families, that it's okay for girls to be focused on sport in the same way as boys. It's not a masculine pursuit. It's not something that's detracting from their schoolwork or detracting from what they should be doing or making them appear not to be feminine, but that it's something that is good and hugely important for their development. So a lot of things go together in terms of trying to make it a level playing field for girls and young women. There's a long way still to go, but like Allison, I'm excited by the progress we're seeing across sport, even though there are so many challenges still to overcome.
Well, absolutely, and I just think it's so important that we all kind of play our part, right? And I think from having mentors and having role models that you can look up to, and organizations like such as yours that invest and put that emphasis on that and support it. It's just you just want children from any background, from any gender, to see that path forward, right? Just to see, hey, if I want to become an athlete on whatever sport it might be, I can, and there's a path for me, and people have done it before me, and I have the opportunity. So again, fantastic work, and just keep it up, Adam, and the whole team is doing great. You guys are doing fantastic. Amanda, through your work leading marketing for Wilson, what messages do you convey to youth athletes, but to young children overall?
Yeah, I think for us, it's about really inspiring that first touch, right? And so what we're talking about is that path, that journey of the athlete. And so from a brand perspective, it's about really sharing stories and I think content that isn't about becoming, the most elite athlete on this planet, but being, as we've all kind of said, reaching your full potential and being the best version of yourself. So our messaging is around a lot of this, like kind of inspiring and embracing more play. How do we get these kids to fall in love the first time they pick up a basketball, as an example, and keep that basketball in their hand, participate with them alongside kind of their journey. And that's really what, from an allyship perspective, we've been kind of angling towards is how do we ensure it's about that athlete, whatever their level of play is, loving what they do. And I think when we keep that at the center of everything we build out, we find that we not only get great engagement, but I think we're also doing good work out there on those courts and fields.
100%, 100%, Allison. Great work as well, and that's exactly what we were talking about, right? Allison, now I'll get back to you. The Gazelle Foundation program's motto is make it healthy and make it fun. At the end of the day, children like to have fun, want to have fun. So with your daughter, being the child of two world-class athletes, what role do you envision sports playing in her life? And how do you make sports fun for her?
Yeah, I'm really excited for the possibilities there. Obviously, being a huge fan of sports myself, I hope that she will love sports as much as I do. But I want her to do whatever she wants to do. But at this age, at 3, she's just um, keeping us busy and running around everywhere. And I'm really excited because she's finally at the age where she can actually do a few organized things. And so we're getting ready to start soccer, and she has a little tennis racket. And so just introducing her to everything. But we try to make things just family events. And so whether we're running around in the
Right.
backyard, whether we're going for a walk with the dog, a hike, we just try to have fun as a family, and we try to stay really active. And I just really love what Adam said about, you know, introducing your children to role models, but also real life examples in their own community. And that's something that is very important to me. I want my daughter to see a very diverse group of people in her lives, and to be able to interact with them, and to look up to them for various reasons, and to see herself in them. And so, yeah, I feel like as a parent, I just give her the tools, and let her find her way and see what she's passionate about and enjoy. And as Amanda said, when she has those experiences with sport, I hope that they are ones that encourage her to continue on, and whether that's to be a professional or to go in a whole different route. I think that those lessons are going to give her the foundation, to be able to be strong in whatever she pursues. And so I'm just really excited to get to play the role as a parent and just support her and show up for her in every way.
I love it. I love it. I think that's all spot on, and that's exactly how I feel about my own daughter as well. Even though I can see she gets very excited when she sees basketballs or soccer balls or golf balls, any
Yeah.
type of ball. She just gets excited, and she has great hand-eye coordination. But
Of
at the same
course.
time, as you were saying, at the same time, you just want to expose her to things,
Yeah.
right? And let her choose her own path. Understanding that sports, it's always, a great value and activity to have in our life. We need to be physically active in order to be healthy. Whether we do it at a level or another level, you need to be active, and sports is such a good way to be healthy. So I couldn't agree more. And exposure to different things, different people, different fields
Yeah.
that she can gravitate towards, learn from. That's fantastic. So again, congrats on your parenting. It looks like she's gonna be great. Um, Adam, how are the Laureate Sport for Good programs adapted to tackle social issues and injustice like violence, discrimination, and disadvantage?
Well, let me go back a step and just say that, building on the conversation that you and Allison just had, it has to start by being fun. That's If you ask kids what they want from sport, they talk about fun. They don't say, "I hope this contributes to improving my performance in school," even though we know it can through our programs. They
Yeah.
don't say, "I hope this gives me employability skills," or "I hope this breaks down barriers between um, this community and the community a few blocks away where there's conflict," or and any of those other elements where we see sport playing a role. Has to start with kids actually enjoying it, and with program design that is intended to let them enjoy it and have fun, because that's what keeps them coming back. And it's that regular retention and that regular opportunity for a safe and inclusive space, which many of the young people we support don't have outside of the sports programs that they're exposed to through our partners. To have those coaches who can act as mentors, to have that peer group who can act as friends in a healthy and inclusive space with positive habits instead of some of the unhealthy habits they might find in engagement with some other groups of their peers. So really, really working to address all of that, and focusing a lot on coming back to the mental health and well-being side of sport, and ensuring Allison spoke again about some of the challenges we see at the very top level, and they're replicated through sport. Some of the challenges that can come, but sport can be an incredible role for healing, for overcoming trauma. And I know I won't talk about this much because you have Megan Bartlett on your next panel, and she is far more of an expert than I am, so she'll cover all of this. But sport has that incredible role to be part of a young person's holistic development, and the other elements you speak about, the overcoming violence, overcoming discrimination, overcoming all sorts of social challenges, all build from that place.
100%. I think it's all. Everything else seems like a consequence of kids and people coming together to play sports, right? And that's one of the biggest powers of sport. Just bringing people together regarding anything else, pretty much. I've been to trips to Africa, to countries that have been through civil wars, and literally tribes have been killing each other And then you see through the sports programs, children from different tribes putting everything aside and just playing basketball, playing soccer, just playing together. Children need to play. They want to play. They have a right to play. And that's big part of their development in many different ways. So I completely agree with you, Adam. All right, Amanda, what responsibilities do brands have to make sure that there is equitable representation in advertising, like gender, ethnicity, physical, and mental ability?
Yeah, I would say quite a large one. And I think consumers are just expecting that as table stakes these days, right? Like we need to, particularly as a brand in the sporting goods space, be a platform that shows what sports can unlock. I think we feel like it's that great equalizer. Then our creative, then our storytelling, our content, the way we step out and talk to consumers needs to reflect that. I know we've been kind of going through an overhaul, if you will, of ensuring that our creative is an equal balance of promoting women's sports and men's sports, particularly on the categories that I manage, as well as really promoting diversity across the entire sort of sports landscape. And so I think what you find is that once you take that first step out there and you sustain that, then the stories are endless, right? And that's why we're here to ensure that, I think we've said it a couple of times, that you can be like that person. If they can do it, why can't I do it? And I think that's the cadence we want to get in. And I think that's really what, if you're a brand person who loves to tell stories, it's an endless opportunity and such a rich space to turn the microphone over to your players and to your coaches.
And there's so many great, inspiring stories, right, out there?
Endless, yes.
Go ahead, Adam.
It's amazing to see how that has developed. 10 years ago, I think we might all say brands and consumers weren't necessarily telling these stories and listening to them. And those of us working in this space might be really trying to champion and encourage that. And now it's something that brands really are stepping up and telling the story of sport as a tool for social change. And it's amazing to see.
All right. Yes. Again, it is amazing, and we got to continue to share those stories that are so relatable and so inspiring to us all. All right. So now I'm going to talk about different things, but I'm going to ask you questions that are open for any of you to answer. Okay. So at the Gazelle Foundation, one of our 4 healthy habits and pillars discussed with children and their families, in addition to sports and physical activities, emotional well-being. Physical activity regularly improves children's overall emotional well-being. In fact, research shows that there's a link between playing sports and self-esteem in children. What other positive effects you guys think that can sports have on a child's mental health?
I can jump in with a quick perspective to say we did some research with Waves for Change, a partner of ours in South Africa, who use surfing as a tool for improving mental health, for what they call a surf therapy curriculum, which is really spreading around the world. And there's fascinating research. Again, I think Megan may talk about this from her perspective on your next panel, but fascinating research into how it actually, we see physical indicators of improved mental health. This really rewires the brain. It affects the hormones in our body. It affects so much of the kind of the science, the biochemistry of our body, that engaging in sport, it's not just you do it and it makes you feel better. I mean, I think we would all say that that's true. We all probably feel better when we take the time to work out, when we have those healthy habits. But it really is a genuinely scientifically proven impact. And I think, again, that's a recognition that has only happened in the last few years, to really see the documented impact on sport improving mental health. So I think it has to be critical to any program that any of our organizations are involved in.
And then I would say on top of that, I think at the end of the day, it's about a sense of belonging, right? And how does it connect folks? There's throughout all of sport, whether you're playing a solo sport or a team sport, I think there's that connectivity between you and your teammates, and it's inclusive by nature. And so I think that in and of itself just helps some of these kids as they're picking up that ball or that racket for the first time, just kind of embrace that there's more like them. And I think that's really important to feel like you're part of something bigger.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. And I remember being that kid, who felt a little bit lost and didn't know where I fit in or where I belonged. And it's sport that really gave me that sense of these are my people. And I think, it being an outlet for a lot of kids, I think we at this point we do see the benefits and we know, and I think it's implementing that now and understanding, at a young age, how can we really teach these habits and how can they become lifestyle, changes for our young people.
Yeah, and I could follow that up with a personal experience for myself because I was, as you guys can imagine, I was that kid, that tall kid that stuck out. Everybody, pointed me out from distance. I was different. We're all kind of different in a way, but when we're kids, we want to blend in, right? We want to be kind of unnoticed, if you will. And basketball and sports gave me the opportunity to gain confidence in myself. Said, okay, well, this is a sport that height it's an advantage, and I'm actually pretty good at it, and I'm getting validated by my classmates, and it feels good. So let me give this a try, right? So it provides us with that opportunity because it's hard as a young boy, girl, to go through certain stages, and just guys said, sports just allows you to gain self-esteem, to connect with others, to develop your social skills, to be accepted, and that's very important for anyone, for any kid. So again, it was kind of I love sharing these examples because they're very, I think, relatable and demonstrative. Another thing, the CDC has reported that the rate of BMI, the body mass index, increased approximately doubled among youth ages from 2 to 19 years old between the pre-pandemic and the pandemic periods. So now we're going to talk about the effects of the pandemic and the confinement that we've had. So among the youth, those overweight and obese during the pre-pandemic period experienced significantly higher rates of BMI increase during the pandemic period than those with healthy weight. How can we help the situation and improve kids' healthy habits? Specifically, how can we increase kids' physical activity?
I think as we see, less happening in schools, I think we rely more on our communities and the organizations, and how else can we have our kids be involved? I think we should absolutely, advocate um, for physical activity to be a part of the school day. But I think that we're seeing more and more it's going to rely on outside organizations to be able to, institute programs and just being able to get our kids involved. And I think also the role of the family, and all families look different, but I think whenever there's an opportunity, whatever your family looks like, or your circle, or your tribe, or however you're connected to your community, really being active there, and really as parents and adults, really taking that responsibility of making sure that our kids stay active, because as you mentioned with those statistics and the pandemic and just the results from that, it's a very real issue.
And I think brands also have a responsibility in that space as well, right? So whether it's a partnership with the YMCA or field restorations as examples, I think brands need to step up and realize that within that ecosystem, they have an enormous responsibility to ensure that access is there. And I think that that's really where we can step up as a community of brands and help kind of get us out of this rut, right? And change the way kids are looking at things and the access that they have.
it comes back as well to equality and inequality, as so many things do. You know, the pandemic was hard for almost everyone, but it really exacerbated existing gaps and existing fault lines in structure. If you live in a big house with a big garden, then the pandemic didn't stop your ability to be doing some things. If you live in NYCHA public housing in New York, you probably didn't necessarily have the same things. You were in a smaller space. Those inequalities are exacerbated across communities of color in access for people with disabilities, you know, on the gender lines that we spoke about before. So it's really an understanding that getting kids active is great as a holistic, you know, as an overall goal, but there is a lot of intersectionality within that needs to be taken into account in how you approach it, to really make sure you're reaching those most in need, not just reaching those who are kind of already there and able to step up with just a little shift of mindset.
And that's what we're talking about, and that's how can we shorten that gap and provide an equal field for everyone, right? For the most vulnerable, for the underserved. Those are the ones that need it the most, because as you said, you know, the people that we enjoy certain privileges, we have access, we have resources, we're fine, but there's a lot of people that are not, right? And so focusing on those families, on those communities, it's critical so we can build a better world for, you know, which is cliche, but it's true and is real. And what do we do about it, right? How can we shorten those gaps? I think that's I don't know, it's just important to keep in mind. Okay, let's go a couple more questions before we jump into the questions from our audience, who have sent a few already. So obviously evidence shows, and it's something that we mentioned, that increased physical activity may improve also academic performance, because I think it enhances our cognitive ability by being active. But unfortunately, schools are shifting away from physical education to allow more time for academic subjects. So how can we better support programs and policies for physical activity in the school environment? And how important is it to be selective of the places and sponsors they align to or with, knowing that kids are watching? So a couple parts to it.
A couple of things I would say. One is a real step that we've taken in this sector over the last few years is being able to actually measure and prove that impact. So instead of us just saying we all have the feeling that sport helps with these things, there's now evidence to do that work. I think I would say that it's why events like this are so important, Pau, why what you're doing is important, why Allison using her platform is important, and why brands using their platform is important from Amanda's perspective, because that's where the actual the power of your voice becomes important in terms of raising people's awareness, in terms of raising government awareness at different levels, in terms of you know, plugging sport into education systems, health systems, and other systems is so critical. And all of these things have to come together. Kind of non-profit organizations can't do that on their own. A single coach can't do that on their own. They can have an amazing impact on the young people they work with, but they can't change a whole system. And that's why we need the evidence. We need the athletes using their platform. We need to be looking at policy change, to have brands coming on board with this, and really all those things have to fit together.
I also think there's something to, yes, there's, you know, being an athlete, and that's how you participate in a sport you love. But I think from an academic perspective, I think it's showing how your passion for a sport on or off the court or field can extend outside of those sidelines. So how do you show that there's a connection between, I really love this game, and here's all the different ways that I can participate in it from a career perspective, off the court. And I think it's broadening the horizon of, you don't have to be LeBron James to stay in basketball, but you can be somebody who is a coach or who is in, you know, works for a brand or an organization. So I think it's also a little bit of eye-opening from a perspective of how what is the true value and kind of reach of sport?
Yeah, I love that. I have witnessed that in my own community, and I've seen kids' faces just light up when they understand that there's other ways to still be involved in sports. There are other careers that can really give you that fulfillment and that joy. And I think it's absolutely what you said, Amanda, about that awareness and
Yeah.
having them understand, because so many kids in my own community just don't have that exposure. And so I think that's really life changing to be able to put people who look like them, who are doing different jobs in front of them, and give them motivation and something to aspire to. So I think, yeah, that's a great outlook.
And just to wrap that up with a couple questions, I think athletes, as you said, talking about awareness, talking about education, talking about empowerment. Those are important concepts because as athletes are very focused on performing, on maximizing that short
Mhm.
career, short period of time, they can do other things along the way that are parallel to their training and performance to develop themselves and to maximize their impact through their active careers and not just wait until they're done competing. What have you done throughout your career in order to prepare yourself and maximize your impact of your great achievements and your great performance throughout? So I think that and then to tie it up with the sponsorships and the relationships with brands. Can the athlete challenge a little bit the brand saying, hey, this is where this is a transactional is one of a lot of conversations that I'm having with people now in organizations. It's like, I don't want just a transactional commercial relationship. I want a transformational relationship.
Mhm.
Like, how can we really not just sell your brand and whatever you sell, which it's great, I'm sure, and otherwise I wouldn't consider it, or I wouldn't associate myself with it. But how can we help these bigger issues? How can we help our community or the world in a way, or things that the athlete cares about? I think that brands also should ask those questions. And those are not very questions that you get asked for when are offered a deal. Yeah, sign a 3-year deal. You look at the money, it's good. Take a couple of appearances, a couple of commercials here and there, great. And that's fine and that's good, obviously. But there can be more to it. You also want to hear what the athlete cares about and how that ties up with what the company does in the community. And so I think that that's an important conversation to have and to put it out there for athletes to think about this and say, hey, I'm not just an athlete. I'm a human being that has a platform, that has an opportunity, that I could be potentially a role model, maybe for my family, maybe just for my community, maybe for my country, maybe for the world. And that comes with a responsibility to me. Success to me equals responsibility, and that's what we have to sometimes interiorize. So just to kind of tie it all up and bring it all together, but I think this is an important conversation and thought to present.
Yeah, I know
All
I
right.
couldn't agree with you more there, Pau. I feel like we're really seeing a special time for athletes in that we are using our platforms, and it is so much bigger than sport. And obviously, it takes so much energy and focus to perform at the highest level. But I think we're just seeing that authenticity more than anything, and that passion to speak on issues that affect us and our own experiences and our own community, and holding brands accountable. And I think because we're doing that, people are are being aware and being more thoughtful with how they spend their money as well. And I think that in the end, that's a win for everybody, because I think
Mm.
that I truly do believe that brands want to be authentic and to live the message that they're putting out. And I think that we're actually seeing that more and more.
Perfect. I know that's great, and I know that we started a little late, so I just want to thank you all for your patience and commitment to our event and our mission and the stuff that we're talking about, which I think we all are very passionate about, and we understand the importance and relevance of it. So I was gonna open up to the questions of the audience. There's a couple, but I see that the couple questions that are here in the chat, they're very much aligned to what we already discussed. So we pretty much provided answers to that and to those questions. So, and I don't want to take more of your time, but I hope that we can continue the conversations. I hope that we can continue complementing our efforts because that's how we're going to achieve a much bigger result and a much bigger impact. So just want to say thank you to the three of you. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation. I really appreciate your time and commitment and what you're doing. So thank you, and we'll be in touch. You know, it's just a small step forward into the stuff that we believe in and what we can do. So thank you, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you all.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Pau, for everything you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Adam. It's my pleasure, and I love doing it. So, again, what a great panel! What a great, really have enjoyed it as much as I have. These are really important conversations. This is important to hear different perspectives from different people that are trying to and understand the importance of sports and the impact that it can have in the communities and the world. So now I will introduce the next panel. So I'm going to introduce Video and Dane. So now I know all of us here could go on and on. So, but let's just go. I think let's just go to this video because our virtual summit is not over yet. And for all you watching at home, please continue to stay with us for State of Play second panel, which will resume after this video. Enjoy.
Today we are at the Weingart East Los Angeles YMCA to provide healthy camp kits for the families that are missing essential programming this summer. In these camp kits, we have activities like jump ropes, coloring books, and even sleep masks so kids can get appropriate rest. The Gazelle Foundation's mission is to reduce childhood obesity rates by promoting healthy habits. We promote healthy eating, sports and physical activity, sleep, and emotional well-being. We believe that every child deserves to grow to their full potential. Currently, in the US, 1 in 5 kids are affected by childhood obesity.
First of all, we want to thank the Gasol Foundation for continuing to be a partner over the last 3 years in supporting communities of need and underserved communities like the one we're in today. And so the Gasol Foundation for the last 3 years has been a critical component to what we do here at Weingart East LA. And today we're here in partnership again with the Gasol Foundation to provide 300 kits that are very needed for our families, especially because a lot of the work that's being done is virtually for our youth, and so they're static, and we want them to get up and move. Although we're in this pandemic, we've been able to work with the Gasol Foundation to be nimble and respond to the needs of the community.
Personalmente para mí como mamá significa pues mucho porque me ha enseñado a cómo yo hacer cosas más saludables en la casa, que a los niños les guste. La verdad para mí es muy significativo porque sabemos que están con nosotros, que nos están apoyando, que están pensando en nosotros como comunidad, que tenemos pues necesidades.
So kids are in front of the screens now more than ever due to COVID-19, and we really wanted to make a difference in their lives. We know it's been difficult, especially on kids, so we're hoping that with these kids, they were able to enjoy the rest of the summer and just be healthy and active. We really want to thank all of our donors, supporters, and all of the volunteers who have made this all possible.
All right. Well, that was a beautiful video made by our team at the Gasol Foundation. So now, after the video, to facilitate our next panel, we have Olympic gold medalist and USA's women's beach volleyball head coach and 2021 national champs, Dane Blanton, Dane was the United States' first two-time male beach volleyball Olympian, where he and his partner Eric Moana, captured the gold medal at the 2000 Sydney Games. He's currently in his third season as head coach of the USC women's beach volleyball program. Dane has also had a distinguished career as sports broadcaster, and Dane has also serves as a motivational speaker through his nonprofit organization Getting to Go, and founded a nonprofit called Dane's Day at the beach, which provides urban youth with the opportunity to participate in beach volleyball. Dane, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Pau. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to be a part of this, and thanks for tuning in. I'd like to welcome you guys to the Gasol Foundation State of Play Virtual Summit. I'll be your host for the second portion of this summit, which will cover play equity and accessibility. We'll also discuss ways to ensure that all children have equal access to sport and structured play, the importance of raising awareness of inequities in sports, and how we can support sports-based youth development. But first, let me welcome these distinguished panelists. I mean, incredible panelists in the first half, now the second half, starting with Megan Bartlett. Megan has spent most of her career working, designing, and advocating for programs that use sports to promote youth development and positively impact communities. She is founder of the Center for Healing and Justice Through Sports, and speaks regularly on the power of sports to create social change and help kids heal. Megan co-authored the book Redesigning Youth Sports, Change the Game, and previously served as the chief program officer at Up to Us Sports, where she created their innovative, nationally recognized trauma-informed coach training program. It is partnering with the Child Trauma Academy to develop the neurosequential model in sports, a fully trauma-informed sports intervention model. Thank you, Megan. That's quite the intro. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up, we have former president of Disney ABC Television Group and ABC News, and that's Ben Sherwood. Ben is the founder and CEO of Mojo, a robust digital platform launched in February of 2021 that empowers parents who coach youth sports. Mojo is the winner of the Webby Award for Best Sports App in 2021. Mojo believes that youth sports has the power to transform not only the lives of the kids on the field, but also the parents and the coaches on the sidelines. Welcome, Ben.
Great to be here. Thank you very much.
And finally, we have Assistant Professor Adjunct of Epidemiology at Yale University, Dr. Yetza Tuakli. And Yetza, tell me if I got that right. Tuakli.
You got it right. Tuakli. Like
okay. Dr. Tuakli is a board-certified physical medicine and rehabilitation physician. She specializes in interventional spine and sports medicine treatments, helping people achieve high physical and athletic performance at all stages of life through holistic mind-body developments and therapies. Dr. Tuakli is also the founding director of the Sports Equity Lab, a research group focused on dismantling inequities in sports while amplifying sports' role as a positive change agent in society. She has also done extensive work and served as the International Paralympic Committee's inaugural welfare officer at the 2016 Paralympic Games. Welcome, Dr. Tuakli.
Thank you so much, and thanks for getting the name right. I'm very impressed.
I had to work on it, and they said the same thing you did, just like broccoli. So, hopefully I won't mess it up. But you guys all, thank you for being here. I'm really honored to have the opportunity to lead such a great discussion. And also for you, the viewer at home, feel free to submit questions through the chat. So we'll reserve some time at the end so we can get to that. But let's get right into it. After those great introductions, I'd like to start off with Ben. And Ben, talk to us about your transition from media executive to becoming involved in a tech startup industry, and what inspired you to found Mojo.
I thank you for starting with me. I think we should start with your other guests who are far more informed and expert in these play equity. I'll simply say that during my time at the Walt Disney Company, first as an executive at ABC News and then overseeing the television networks of the Walt Disney Company, my full-time job was coaching youth sports. That was my part-time job at Disney. I was coaching 2 boys in 4 different sports with very little aptitude, with very little ability. And what I came to quickly understand was that volunteer coaches are sent out onto the field with very little preparation, with very little tools. We expect our math teachers to have certification to teach arithmetic and division, expect our English teachers to know something about English. But for so many kids, we send them out to play sports with coaches who have been voluntold to get out there, who have been sort of forced to go out there. They're very well intentioned, they're very well meaning, they've got all the best at heart, but they have almost no training and very little resources. And so when I left the Walt Disney Company, my personal goal was to help millions of parents around the world who want to be involved in the youth sports journey, who want to help kids grow and learn and succeed, and give them tools and resources to make them more successful so that the kids can have a better time, they can grow and they can learn. And so I made the transition from a big media company to a tiny startup, but we're moving quickly, and we're helping families across the United States get more involved in kids sports and do it the right way, backed by experts and like. And I think on the play equity issue, just very quickly, our view is that for all the reasons that the experts will explain, there's a huge inequality in youth sports. Mojo is free for every coach. Our view is that we should put the world's best resources in the hands of anybody who wants to help kids get better at sports, and that it should not cost $1. They should have access to the absolute best expert-backed resources so that they can make a difference on the field. And that's sort of one of the core founding principles of our company, is access to great coaching materials for everybody, no cost.
I love it, Ben. That sounds interesting. I think I'm going to download that app for sure. I have a 3.5-year-old, so my full-time job is about to be a second coach, So, Megan, let's switch over to you. Your newest book, a kid's book about trauma, focuses on helping kids heal through trauma. How can physical activity and youth sport coaches help heal a generation coming out of this COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, thanks. And I'll use what Ben said as a sort of starting point here. Ben's exactly right that we expect most coaches in this country to do what they do with no support, with no training, with no support. And often, I love the word voluntold. Often the idea is that nobody else will do it. So they find themselves out there trying to do their best. And I think the thing that I'll add to that is not only do they not have the sort of skills and support to coach the sport that they're coaching, but they often also don't have the background in understanding young people, background in youth development, background in human development, background in psychology, and all the things that you need in order to be a great adult for a young person. The well-meaning, sort of kindness and love that a coach can give kids goes a long way. And then there are some kids who have more needs than that. There are some kids who face significant adversity. And if we can, what typically happens to those young people is that they get pushed out of sport. There's something about them that makes them not able to stay in the sport. A coach kicks them out because they can't behave, or they find themselves, the kids who need it the most, sort of pushed out of those opportunities. And so at the Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport, we believe very strongly that those are the kids who need the sport the most. And if we offer sport the right way and we equip adults with the right information, that they can not only, sort of help them develop lots of the things we think about, they help them develop the sort of essential skills that will help them be successful in school and in life, but that it can actually rewire the brain and help young people heal. That the combination of safe, positive relationships, of physical activity and the sort of general great work that being active does for your brain, and the opportunity to engage in resilience building stress, right? Little doses of stress that are controlled and manageable can actually help us deal with stress in our lives. So I think that's why we exist, is to give coaches those resources with a particular focus on young people who've faced significant adversity.
Yeah, I love that. I just on a personal note, it's like, it's so true. When I don't work out, I am not even nearly as effective as I am when I do work out. I worked out this morning for the first time in a couple of weeks, and that's a long time for me, and already off to a better day, and just energized, and everything's firing. So thank
And
you for
that's
that.
even,
And
yeah, that's even more pronounced in kids who are having, sort of overwhelming stress in their lives, who have adversity and chaos in their lives, that the ability of sport to regulate them is a sort of impact of sport that is totally under-realized.
let's move over to Dr. Tuakli. COVID-19 has further illuminated the social and racial injustices in health. Equity in sports is a social justice issue. In what ways can we close the play equity gap? But first, can you describe to us the difference between equality and equity in sports?
Dane, I can. So just want to follow up on what Megan said about that. I love that concept of resilience building stress as opposed to toxic stress, right? And so what Megan was really describing is responsible sport environments, which is something that the Center for Sport and Human Rights puts out. And I love that phrasing. So happy to describe the difference between equity and equality. I think people conflate the two terms, but they're not the same thing. So equality is giving everyone the same thing, right? But then equity is giving everyone what they uniquely need to thrive. For example, equality would have you give every kid on your team the same pair of sneakers, same brand, same colors, but the exact same pair that goes to the kid with no transportation and no family support, who, as Adam Frazier said on the previous panel, lives in public housing. That same pair also goes to the kid from a supportive family with a big house and a big garden. So on the other hand, equity recognizes that not everyone began in the same place in society. Due to some pretty entrenched systems of privilege and power that historically disadvantage some, but empower others, instead of giving everyone the same thing, equity gives everyone what they need to thrive. So the kid from humble beginnings, they might need a carpool organized, or a few pairs of sneakers, or maybe even nutritional support, so they can play safely and really enjoy the sport just like every other kid. Equity considers context, right? And accounts for the external factors and forces that shape our lives. A lot of that has nothing to do with individual characteristics. It's just sort of systems of power and privilege that exist, fairly or unfairly. So the same inequities we see in society, we do see in sport. So that's all the isms that we all know too well. Racism, sexism, ableism, abuse, interpersonal violence, and a lot of others. They negatively impact people on society's margins mostly. So that's historically Black, Indigenous people of color, girls, women, those with various sensory, cognitive, or physical disabilities. And it's a big question, Dane. Now, how do we close inequity gaps? It's not easy. It's sort of like, how do we shift the Titanic's path on a dime? But it starts, I think, with just calling it out. One of my guilty pleasures is watching The View. I do watch The View. And my favorite host, Sunny Hostin, said something really beautiful about racism that resonated. She said, we all want it to be some past atrocity that we've abolished and replaced magically with equity and equality. Like, we want that. We all want that. But that can't happen if we just pretend that it doesn't exist. And I really like that statement because she kind of made the point that we really can't ignore it. So the first step, I think, is just calling it out loudly, clearly, unapologetically, and making sure that we name it. It's in sport just like it's in society. And I think that's at least going to put us on the path to dismantling them.
I love that. I had to break out my notes here about the equity and equality. That was such a great definition. Equality is everyone's getting the same thing, whereas equity, you're giving what they need. Is that accurate? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and
Learn,
ethnicity is.
I didn't know I
Oh,
was
you
going
know,
to
this
be learning so much as a moderator. So that's really a great definition.
Yeah, Dane, just to say, I'm so sorry with the professorial stuff comes out sometimes, but just wanted to say that, when you consider context like that, it really takes the burden off of individuals. So you're considering just structural inequities, structural power imbalances that have been historically forged. That makes it a little bit easier for us to all relate to why it is we have to take it so seriously.
Awesome. Let's move on to Ben. Ben, good coaching can help build obviously confidence, character, and many other characteristics. How do the expectations that coaches set, the biases that they hold, and the feedback that they give affect the trajectory of a child's personal development and achievement?
So again, I have a tremendous amount of humility in this conversation with on a panel with two leading minds and thinkers in an area of youth sports that frankly needs so much more attention. I can offer what we're learning at Mojo. We've put together academic and scientific advisory board of some of the great thinkers in the youth sports space from Michigan State and from University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and the Aspen Institute and the Sports and Society program. And so we've done our best to educate ourselves. We are not experts in the sports themselves. And I just want to emphasize something that Megan said, which we take very seriously. We think actually that the most important thing is to coach the kid first and then the sport. And so Mojo's entire philosophy is, how do we equip moms and dads who will get out of work or find a few minutes to coach a team? How do we equip them with trusted resources so that they can find ways of coaching kids first and then sports? And we try with articles and with videos and with lots of other resources to help surround volunteer coaches at the grassroots and the recreational level with trusted information to help them see the kid first and then get into the sport. And I heartily agree with Megan's observation, which is that the most important thing that we can do is actually surround kids with positive examples and with encouragement and support, and see them for who they are as best we can. And that's really where we come at it. We also think that there is a very big difference in terms of developmentally appropriate materials between helping a 4-year-old succeed and helping a 13-year-old succeed. And one of the things that sort of we experience with the voluntold community, ads out there and others who are just on a field with a group of kids is, hey, I played high school baseball. I guess I can sort of coach these 6-year-olds. But of course, your last experience in high school baseball, which may have been 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, is not really relevant to a bunch of 4-year-olds swinging at a tee. And furthermore, just because you happen to have a 4-year-old doesn't mean you necessarily understand 4-year-olds. So again, in our view, let's give volunteers as many trusted resources as they can in digestible and understandable forms so that they can meet the kids first and then help them succeed in sports. I totally agree with Dr. Twockley's observation also, by the way, that these are huge, massive, complicated issues that have all kinds of structure and system around them. And we're just trying to put something into the hands of people to try to help make a little bit of a difference. I happen to have had the privilege in my last career seeing The View professor. And so I'm delighted to know that someone is watching The View and is actually benefiting from The View. It's a wonderful show, and Sunny Hostin is a terrific host. And I think that her definition is a really important one. Don't pretend it doesn't exist. Name it, call it out, and talk about it.
Thanks, Ben. Back to you, Dr. Twockley. It's extremely important to have organizations like Sports Equity Lab to protect against harassment and abuse, discrimination, and other harms in sports. What are the first steps in eliminating these issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Ben, for the empathic comment about The View. So yeah, I think anchoring this in science is the very, very, very first step. Science is a lot like sports. There's objectivity to it. You either make the time or you don't. You win the medal or you don't. With science, it's the same thing. The gene is expressed or it's not. There's structural change or it's not. It breaks down people's discomfort with some of these topics that are very commonly painted as emotional or political when they're not. They're scientific. So I think that's the very first step, is anchoring this in science. When it comes to the neurobiology of trauma, the neurobiology of attachment, and the neurobiology of empathy, as well as that of positive emotions, we have clear roadmaps for how to optimize our human performance on the one hand, but also how to irreparably damage it on the other hand. So I truly find solace and excitement in science for that reason. And I think the very first step is just anchoring it very clearly in the science of it all. Happy to get into that a little bit more as we get into the panel further, but I would say that's step one.
Thank you. Megan, what physiological and psychological effects can sports have on youth?
Gosh, if only this panel were a few hours long, we could talk about all of them. But again, it goes back to this idea of, if we're doing sport right, if we're doing sport and we are rooting our sport in science, for example, what Dr. Twackley just said, if we really understand what young people need in order to develop at their sort of where they are in their own growth, where they are as, you know, in terms of their developmental stages, all of those things that we expect a lot of adults who work with young people to know, and we don't expect coaches to know. So I think it's making sure that sport's done correctly, but also that to the point that both my other panelists were making earlier, is that, you know, sort of at a first step, we have to do no harm. We have to make sure that we are rooting our training and support for coaches in science. And also, I think, calling out the harm that's being done in sport, right? In the same way that we have to call out inequities in a larger system, we have to call out the harms of sport. Sport is not perfect. Sport is not just this beautiful place where kids develop psychological and social and emotional skills. It's a place where a lot of young people have really terrible experiences and can be harmed in lots of ways. So I think first we have to sort of reckon with our own problems in sport before we can fully realize the great psychological and social and emotional benefits of sport, which, you know, it truly is. If you look at any positive outcome you'd want someone to have, you can probably help someone develop it through sport. If you do sport the right way, right? You can help them learn so many social and emotional skills. You can help them get more, be better emotionally regulated and manage their emotions, and the biological impact of sport can be such a powerful impact on bodies and on their bodies and their brains. It's just like the number of positive things are endless, but none of them happen unless we create the right environment. And I think going back to what Dr. Twackley said about the difference between equality and equity, one of the biggest challenges in sport is that coaches think that they should be coaching through the lens of equality, not equity, right? You give all 6-year-olds the same thing because maybe you have a 6-year-old and it works for your 6-year-old, but it's not going to work for all the 6-year-olds. And that's a pervasive understanding in coaching, that it's sort of my way or the highway, instead of what does this individual athlete need. We often understand it from a sports skill perspective, right? This athlete needs to develop their left-handed layup. This athlete needs to be a better rebounder, but we don't understand it from a youth development perspective. And so we're not going to get any of those great outcomes if we don't do it that way.
Can I just add one quick thing?
Yes, Ben.
Yeah. I mean, I think with a bunch of humility about some of the huge structural issues that we're talking about, I think there's also an important environmental factor that we need to address, which is that coaching is stressful, coaching is time consuming, coaching is hard, and we don't make it easy for those folks who are coaching. And so I think that one of the places that we are trying to attack is to try at no cost to put tools into coaches' hands that with the tap of a button, they can have access to a practice plan that is age appropriate, developmentally expert backed, and that they don't have to do any work. They don't have to study. They don't have to read long articles. They don't have to go to long training sessions. And I think that one of the barriers, the obstacles to accomplishing many of the things that Megan just talked about is that we sort of make it hard. We either don't give somebody anything at all, or it feels totally overwhelming that I now have to go do all this work in order to be able to try to help a team. And so we're trying to figure out ways with very harried parents, very harried volunteers, people running out from their second or their third job to get to a field at 6 o'clock to be able to make a difference in kids' lives, to put things in front of them in ways that we make it easy and we take the stress out, and they can trust that the resources they've got are going to help them and do no harm and maybe do some good.
And I would just add that we're lucky to work with Dr. Bruce Perry, who is a world-renowned child trauma specialist, and he always says a dysregulated adult can't regulate a dysregulated child, right? And so to Ben's point about how hard it is to be a coach and all the expectations we have for coaches without any of the support, if a coach comes to the field harried, the chance that the other kids are going to experience sort of the hairiness of practice makes the chance that environment is more harmful than good go up.
Yeah, we all know how big sports are, and Dr. Tuakli, especially in our society. So how can we as a society amplify sports' role as a positive change agent in our society?
Yeah, it just goes back to what Megan previously said. We're pretty much lucky to be in the business of sport because sports will always naturally do what it does, but responsible sport, right? It's irresponsible sport with harried coaches and chaos and lack of professionalization. That's not necessarily going to do what it's supposed to do, but responsible, healthy sports environments will naturally do what they're supposed to do. In the first panel, Pau called sports big universities. I think that was a great way of describing it because they teach us so much. They create joy. And then there's a German theologian I really like. Her name is Dorothee Solle, Solle, 2 dots above the O. I hope I'm pronouncing that the correct way. But she said something that I really liked. A reporter asked her, how would you explain happiness to a child? And then she just answered it, I wouldn't explain it. I just toss him a ball and let him play. And that was just like this big moment for me because it just gets to what Megan was talking about. At their core, sports are just magic. I mean, when they're stripped down to their studs, they absolutely draw people in. They're fun. They foster individual and collective growth. They create joy. They don't really need help positively influencing society when they're done responsibly. Actually, society needs help humbling itself and learning from sport. Unfortunately, we've just successfully layered all of these considerations of greed and power dynamics into sport. And with that comes all the social inequities we're talking about on this panel. So my sense is that in their purest form, sports have this unshakable magic that will always survive. So the only thing we need to do is just focus on, I think, very rigorous methodological dismantling of the inequities that we find in sport, taking a very step-by-step approach anchored in science. And once we do that, not that that's easy, but once we do, I think sport will take care of itself. It'll do the rest. It'll amplify positivity in society. That's how it was designed. That's how it was built. It's like glitter. Like you just can't get rid of that fact. Like it's just, it's just everywhere. So I really feel like, I don't know Megan from prior, but I feel like we're really on the same wavelength. And so much of what she said, I just find myself nodding so vigorously to. And I think if we don't mess with sport too much, it'll do what it's supposed to do.
Did we just become best friends?
I feel like we did. I feel like even from the Oh,
All right, Ben, let me move over to you. You know, you've described yourself as a mediocre athlete that gave up competitive sports. We've seen a trend that more and more kids are quitting sports. And what advice would you give them? And how is Mojo creating opportunities to retain these youth?
First of all, I feel left out of the friendship circle over there, so I'm just going to put my hand
You're
up
in.
and say, please,
No,
please,
you're in.
no, you're in. You're in.
Second,
Can I get in?
Yeah,
You're in, Dane. You're in.
you and I are both. Second. I think you left off a key part of my sentence about being a mediocre athlete who gave up competitive sports at age 12. You know, we all know the data. Kids are dropping out at increasingly earlier ages. Some of the statistics suggest that it's 70% by the age 13. Some numbers indicate that it's 70% by the age of 11. The pandemic has obviously made things a lot worse. And I think that there's so many different reasons that kids are dropping out, and they're so complicated. And with a bunch of humility, I would just note that the data that we've seen suggests that a significant reason has to do with the fact that they're not fun, and that they're pressured, they're stressed, and families and kids feel forced out or pushed out or priced out of sports. Too expensive, too much time commitment, too competitive, and that is bad for society, and that is bad for kids. And our view at our little company is, what can we do to make sports more fun for families, one family at a time, by taking some of the stressors out, by taking some of those pressures out. We as a little company can't address the huge societal problems that Megan and Professor Twalkley have described. But I think that we're trying to offer ways for sports to be more fun for individual families and for individual teams by giving them the resources that can help make it more fun and more enjoyable and more successful for everybody. Again, developmentally and age appropriate. And so that's our view that there's. I mean, I totally agree with the previous comment, which is that sports have a kind of pixie dust around them. I come from Disney, where there's lots of pixie dust. And our view is, and I love that phrase, there's an unshakable magic to sports. And unfortunately, you go out there and you see moms and dads screaming on the sidelines, and you see families priced out of sports because it costs thousands of dollars to play as opposed to small amounts. And you just think there's just so much lost opportunity, and so many kids denied the opportunity to benefit from all of the things that come from participation in sports. One of the things that's happened in Los Angeles, thanks to the great leadership of Renata Simril at LA 84, is that the LA Olympic Committee has just made it sports accessible for tens of thousands of kids across the city by basically putting money into programs so that the cost of registering will only be $10 in a city program right now. This is all part of the legacy of 84 and leading up to the 28 Olympics. And it's really a model of trying to take cost out of the equation so that everybody has access to sports, and it's not just kids with means that can play them. So there you go. That's a couple of thoughts there.
I love that. Megan, can you share a successful example of how the Center for Healing and Justice through Sports Trauma-Informed Coaching is helping youth?
Yeah, I can try. I think whenever someone asks for an example of this work, I always think of our partnership with a school called the Urban Dove Team Charter School in New York City. And the Urban Dove Team Charter School is sort of not your typical charter school in that they are a school for overaged, underaccredited young people in New York City. So all young people for whom the education system hasn't previously been working. So they have to be 16 and have fewer than 3 high school credits. And they graduate them in 3 years so that they receive their high school diploma. And the Urban Dove Team Charter School is a fully integrated sports-based youth development school. But you can imagine that for many of these young people for whom the education system hasn't been working, they also happen to be exposed to significant adversity in other parts of their world. And over the last 18 months, since the world has been so hard to be in for everybody, it's been particularly hard to be in for the population of young people at a place like the Urban Dove. So a few years into the Urban Dove's work, and I've been involved with them since they started about 10 years ago. A few years in, the executive director came to me and said, sort of not surprisingly, the young people in this school have a huge amount of trauma and have a huge amount of need, and they need their sport. We need our coaches to be delivering sport program that's more equitable and not through an equality lens. A lot of the coaches are here and delivering sport, and there's some great things that kids are getting through it, but they're not they don't have the skills yet to be able to offer something different to every young person on their team, right? To be able to really meet the needs of the young people and meet them where they are. So can you help us help our coaches do that? And we've worked with them for many years now, and the sort of skill with which a coach is able to manage their team despite the tremendous need that so many of the young people on the team have is sort of overwhelming. And so the fact that these coaches are with young people for 3 years, they deliver sport during the day, which helps kids be regulated in school, which helps them sort of open up their prefrontal cortex and learning brain for all the things that are going to come throughout the day, instead of like you working out this morning, Dane. You're much better off because you worked out this morning. The Urban Dove, makes sure that kids work out early in the day, so the rest of the day goes better. All these things that are sort of biologically respectful of what kids who've experienced adversity need. And we've been talking a lot about magic, and I think the Urban Dove Team Charter is magic. I think the way they've built their program, the way they support and equip their coaches, and support and equip their coaches is really important. You have to give training, but then you also have to keep supporting them so that, like Ben said, they're not harried, they're not overwhelmed, they have the support they need. It's a magical place that we've played a very small role in helping them.
Dr. Tawakli, in what ways do you think inclusive and safe sports environments enhance performance? Because that's always a huge issue.
In every way. And I'm going to be biologically respectful and talk a little bit about the science of it too, because what Megan just described is an example of that. It's magic, but it's also biology and science, which makes it so much more reassuring for me and enduring. So as human beings, we all know that we're hardwired for two things: relationship and connection, right? Relationship and connection. Those two things we're just hardwired for. We're social creatures, and the quality of our social connections really does actually matter. Athletes and other high performers just intuitively know this. So we know when we're training and competing in healthy communities and with secure attachments, with mutually respectful relationships, performance soars. I mean, that's when we're in that zone for the most part. We also know that when we're operating in unhealthy communities with dysfunctional attachments and irresponsible or otherwise even just subtly demeaning relationships, performance really suffers. And that's not really a matter of magic or opinion, it's real science. And some of the newer animal models that we are looking into now, they're still at the level of the animal model. So we haven't yet explored this in human models, just to caveat that. But we're finding that neurons are unlike every other cell, unlike muscle cell, bone cell, skin cells. They're uniquely sensitive to trauma. They just respond differently and quickly in the amygdala and the hippocampus and other parts of the brain that are really important for neurotransmission and human performance. So this is a really exciting paradigm shift in neurotransmission generally, but it also has really big implications for sports performance. Athletes are not immune to biology, right? So it's sometimes feels like I'm bursting people's bubbles when I say this, but athletes are just like every other human being. I mean, Dane, I'm sure you know this from all over the world. You see these advanced sports science institutes, these human performance collectives that a lot of athletes might go through. And these are centers of excellence, and they're great. I mean, I used to train at the IMG Academy down in Bradenton, and it felt like the Starship Enterprise half the time. But what you often see is that some of these topics are totally left out, right? Sports people spend years trying to figure out the perfect throwing angle for a baseball pitch, or in my case, the perfect takeoff angle for the long jump. But the neurobiology of attachment, the neurobiology of trauma, they're left out of that human performance equation. But they're actually really integral to it. So I think this persistent blind spot that I think at some level really has to do with people's sense that athletes are secretly superhuman, which is a myth that doesn't help anybody. Like we're not cyborgs. I think it would make sense if we were one-dimensional, but we're integrated whole people. So just like everybody else, if an athlete is anchored in toxic relationships and dysfunction going on in the background at home, I mean, good luck getting them to consistently execute on all those perfect angles. Just as a point of reference, we actually have seen this recently at the Tokyo 2020 Games. So Simone Biles mentioned that she could not spatially locate. All right, so the cerebellum is part of the brain that's affected by interpersonal trauma very directly, I mean structurally, and it's associated with the ability to maintain upright posture. There are other central systems involved, but she basically said after the games that during the games, the overwhelming traumatic stress that she and her sister survivors experienced over 2+ years of processing and reprocessing long-standing abuse at the hands of their team doctor really led to her inability to spatially locate, which is an organic neurobiological process. That's like having a dysfunctional gyroscope. It's a lot more than mental health and mood. It's a neurobiological process. So in that case, we saw that it directly influenced sports performance. So to answer your question in just 3 words, in every way. In 2021, we're almost in 2022 now, we have the scientific tools that we need to do things differently. When it comes to sports performance, we know that we need to take an integrated approach to intentionally developing sports environments that are healthy and safe and responsible, free from interpersonal violence and trauma. And I think if we do that down the line, some of the performances will reflect it into the future. So in a few words, in every way, in many words, what I just said.
I would also just add to what Dr. Twackley said there. I think another thing to consider when we consider the way in which trauma affected the brain and the performance of Simone Biles, we also saw her trying to perform in a context where all of her positive relationships were taken away from her because athletes were in Tokyo by themselves. And so the buffering impact of positive relationships was potentially amplifying the challenges that she was having based on her trauma. And so that for me is always part of the hopeful piece about the power that coaches and other positive relationships that young people have can be, is that they are, your relational health is more predictive of your outcomes than your adversity. And so every time Ben equips a volunteer coach to be great at supporting young people, those positive relationships can be buffering from the overwhelming stress and trauma in other parts of their lives.
Completely.
And I have a question from the chat from Annie, and any of you can step up and answer this. The question is, do you have recommendations on how to best offer an inclusive environment and an atmosphere of belonging through sports with students with special needs? Dr. Twackley, you look like you got the answer for that.
I don't know. I'm just nodding about everything. It's such a great question that was asked. Students are people that have either physical or intellectual or sensory disabilities, are just as entitled to responsible sport as everybody else. And I think that's a really good question that's asked by the audience member. A lot of times there's this sort of pejorative attitude that some of us who are non-disabled can take towards those with disabilities. And we make the assumption that we know better. So I always advocate for asking students what they need. What sports do you want to play? How can we adjust and find equipment that's adaptable to your special considerations? And even the word special can sometimes be a little bit challenging in the disability discourse. So I think the first question is ask those students. I mean, if these are people that are in your community or in your school or in your community environment, it would be nice to find out what their interests are, and then find a way to adapt the environment to suit their participation in those sports activities. One sort of creative way of thinking about disability that my field of medicine tries to espouse is thinking about disability as a dynamic interaction between an individual and their environment. So we have an individual with various capacities, and there's the environment that can bend and bow to suit that person's requirements for participation. So find a way to balance out that equation so that the individual and their environment dynamically work together to accomplish the goal, which is sports participation.
And here's another great question from the chat from Christina. It says, recently the conversation around gender identity and sexual orientation in sport has begun to gain recognition in youth sports. What would this panel suggest as strategies for best supporting these youth and ensuring an inclusive environment regardless of how someone may identify? Megan, you want to take that? Ben?
Yeah, I can try. Ben, did you want to? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
You go first.
Okay. Well, first, I think that we're still learning a ton about sort of what are the best practices for supporting young people for whom their identity puts them at risk of some of the same discrimination and lack of support that a lot of the other isms we talked about earlier do. So we don't know all the best ways to support those young people. Except that we do know, sort of back to the idea of how do we make the most inclusive environments for anyone, regardless of what they have going on in their lives. I think that goes back to what Dr. Twalkley said, is this interaction between a person and their environment, but also I think what a coach can do is really norm that every young person has their own needs, is on their own path. And if that path means that you have special needs because of a physical disability or special needs because of a emotional dysregulation, or just special needs because you're not great at your, you can't get your elbow up in your baseball stance, right? Whatever those needs are, if we can take that equity lens to it, that everyone has different needs and all the needs are worth meeting, then I think that works across whatever sort of differences young people have.
Ben, did you want to follow up or?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a very practical on the field, on the court example of this that we try to do with our Mojo application. We know that lots of people don't see themselves in sports. And so what we've tried to do both with coaches and with kids is to have as representative a group as we can in each of the activities that we demonstrate in our application, so that coaches and kids see themselves. And we then give the resources to the coaches so that they can then see the kids with their individuality and uniqueness. And I think that this is it seems obvious thing, but one of the things that we've observed is that a lot of the girls are dropping out 2 to 6 times faster than boys. And one of the reasons, hugely complicated factors involved in this, but a lot of it has to do with not seeing coaches or female athletes as role models, or that they can follow, or they can model themselves on. And so we've committed lots of resources and effort to making sure that everything that we do, you can see yourself and see what you can become through sports. It seems simple, but it's just a very small and practical thing that we're trying to do. where we believe deeply in both equity and being able to see yourself playing the sport and succeeding in the sport.
When it comes to listening to young people who are, transgendered or gender non-binary, there's a great program called Gender Cool that has just recently put out a project on sport and their experiences in sport. And so going back to what Dr. Twackley said about listening to young people about what they need, that's a great place to start too.
Yeah, and then I just wanted to flag one more resource for people. So if people are looking for somebody to read, Dr. Gayle Knudsen, Knudson, she's out of Vancouver. She's done some great work on heterosexism and transphobia, which are two different concepts. And we recently did a British Journal of Sports Medicine podcast on sports equity, and she did a great job of summarizing that section of it. I find her work very inspiring, progressive. As Megan said, we're still learning, and she's just sort of on the leading edge. So that would be a great resource for people to look up if they wanted to read more, learn more, etc.
So one final question for you guys, and feel free to jump in on it. There are various factors that influence biased decision making toward women and racial minorities. What are some strategies for overcoming biased decision making in sports organizations? Megan, Dr. Ben.
There's so many. Megan, do you want to start and I'll jump in?
No, I was just going to say, it feels like it goes back to how big the problem of inequities in sport are, right? This is a big, complicated answer also. And I think for me, it comes back to the idea that the way our sort of brain architecture is developed is all based on experience. And so if you only have experience with people who look like you, then that's the only people who are safe and familiar to you. And so in order for people who are different from you to feel safe and familiar, then you have to sort of force yourself to have positive experiences with people who are different. To me, that's one of the most powerful things that sport can do, is create the opportunity for people to have positive experiences with new and different folks. But again, that has to be responsible. That has to be done in a way that doesn't reinforce those biases, and make sure that people are make sure that the interactions actually are positive. So it's a big part of, it's a huge thing that needs to be tackled in sport. And for me, it always feels hopeful because it is a place where people interact with people who are unlike them more than maybe they do in other parts of their world.
I would agree with that. Just to put a pin on that, I would say that because some of these biases, number one, they're unconscious. And then number two, a lot of the systems of power and privilege that we wrestle with are structural. So that said, we're all implicated. So I've got similar biases to you, Dane, to you, Ben, to you, Megan. They're just there, and we all have them. That said, we have to be very intentional about dismantling them. It's not going to happen on its own. It's not going to naturally occur because we want it to. So I think making sure that you look around the table and ask who's not here when it comes to the decision makers, whose perspective is not represented at, again, the decision-making table of these organizations. I think that's a very good, easy starting point. But then the second point is to make sure that the message is always loud and clear from the top. I think when you more easily get buy-in to these types of conversations when leadership in organizations are putting it out there and taking the lead on it, because people naturally want to go along with what their group is doing. So if that's coming from the top, most people will want to lean in the direction of those messages and that messaging. So we're all implicated. It's not personal, and at the same time, because we're all implicated, we have to be intentional about taking some of these systems down.
Good stuff, you guys. Ben, you noticed that? I got the app, Ben. I'm ready. Mojo. But you guys, I think that's a great place to, to end, because I want to be respectful of your time as well. And it's 12 o'clock. Like you said, we could talk about this for so long and at length. And I've learned so much being here moderating with you guys. So I really appreciate it. I'd like to once again thank Megan Bartlett, Ben Sherwood, and Dr. Yetza Tawakli. You all doing such amazing work and making a difference in the lives of children all over the world. And we can't thank you enough for taking your time today to share your thoughts. And